Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome back to EduTech 2020, Tech for Education, Transforming Education Digitally. Ladies and gentlemen, we now move on to an insightful fireside chat with Mr. Krishna Kumar, founder and CEO, Simply Learn, and Dr. Manish Kumar, MD and CEO, National Skill Development Corporation. Over to you, sir.
So thank you, Srinivas, and thank you everyone for joining this session. I'm very pleased to share that we have Dr. Manish Kumar, MD and CEO of NSDC, joining us for this conference. Being part of edtech industry or education industry in general for last 10 years, I have heard about NSDC. I know NSDC stands for National Skill Development Corporation, but I don't think at the same time I know NSDC. And I'm sure a lot of you are also not very sure what NSDC is. It is a government organization. Is it a private one? Is it a private public partnership? I'm going to ask a lot of questions related to that with Dr. Manish Kumar. And as and when if you have any questions, if anything is in specific in your mind, please write it on the chat window. We'll definitely try to address that. So, Dr. Manish, thank you for joining again. So, as I was talking to you off this event, also that we wanted most of the questions are related to NSDC because I think that I don't know enough. So, I'm sure a lot of people in the industry they don't know enough. So, I wanted you to help us understand what NSDC is. Is it a government setup? Is it a public-private partnership? And I also know that if anybody Googles you, they get to know that you are an ex-IS officer. In fact, it's not clear whether you are an ex-IS officer or you are an IS officer running this organization. I think some bit of background will be very helpful for our audience.
Okay, thank you so much. So if you look at National Skill Development Corporation as an institution, it's been made in a very unique way. It was created by the Union Cabinet of India in 2008, but therefore the origin is government, but the government was very clear that they wanted it to be a private sector organization and not a government organization. Therefore, they gave 51% of their shares to various chambers of commerce. So FICCI, CII, and there are 10 of them actually, as which there are 7 more, who actually own us, in a way, the 51% of us, and the remaining 49% is owned by Government of India. That 49% for the purpose of management or for the purpose of coordinating with us is given to Ministry of Skill Development and Entrepreneurship, and that's how we are now connected. So in 2015, of course, MSD came in. Prior to that, it was with Ministry of Finance. So this is how we were organized as an institution. Our board is private sector majority. Our chairman is Mr. A.M. Nayak, who is also the group chairman of Larsen & Toubro. And we have consistently have had chairman from private sector. I think it's part of our mandate actually to have somebody from private sector as the chairman. As CEO, I came from the World Bank, and yes, I was in the IAS at one point of time. I worked in the northeast of India for about 20 years before moving to the World Bank, doing some work both in Middle East and North Africa when I was in Washington, D.C. And also I was involved with Swachh Bharat from the World Bank out here in India. So that's my background. Yes, I am an ex-IAS in that sense. I know the private sector, I know the government, and therefore I play the bridging role between the two as of now.
So thanks, Dr. Manish. I think this is very helpful. Now coming back to my next question, that you said that 51% is owned by industry body, 49% is owned by government. So I want to understand what is NSDC mission and how do you get funding? Like all these 51% shareholders, they also put in money. So why would they put money in skilling Indian youth? So some context on that will be helpful.
Yeah, so I think that's an important one. When we were created as a body in 2008, as I said, and 2009 we became operational, we were more a lending body. We are more like a developmental bank at that particular point of time. So it's almost like we are the World Bank for skills type. It's basically a developmental bank. Actually, I have a clearance from RBI, but we don't work as NBFC because we don't have to report like NBFC. Yet we have been given that mandate that yes, we could do lending, and we do lending. So what we essentially did was there was no market at that time of skill development. There were fragmented market, but there was no cohesive market, and we began to work on that. So first thing, we created a lot of private sector entities that we funded at that point of time, who even today are doing quite well. For the initial seed capital and guidance on how you could go about doing skill development, it led to a huge number of centers being opened. We have almost 9,000 centers across the country that has opened over time. And we skill almost 5 million people through these centers, over half of them through government program, half of them where people pay fees and learn, etc. So therefore, we created that ecosystem initially, as you'll see. So that I would say was our initial mandate. Over time, we began to get other activities or get into other activities. So when government wanted to actually put its own money, then they gave that money to us to implement. Now, how NSDC functions is essentially two parts. One is we function like any bank that, okay, I lend money, then when I recover money, I use a certain percentage of the interest we charge, and we charge soft interest, 6%. So a percentage of that as our administrative fee. So the core function of NSDC is actually based on that banking principle, that you use the interest money, a part of it, for running yourself. Otherwise, the corpus belongs to government. Through an investment management agreement, I ensure that the money that we are spending is reported, and the government is aware that how the money is being spent. So this is one part. And secondly, when government gives grant management to us, like PMKVY, for managing that entire thing, then they engage us like they would have engaged anybody else. They could have engaged ENY, they could have engaged KPMG or any other entities, but they prefer us, and because of our knowledge and the fact that we were created specifically for that purpose, and the fact that the market is not there as of now, and we are the only guys who actually play that market role. So we get certain percentage from that also, which is, by the way, very low. Is 4% actually of the total money that is spent, which is really, really low. So we are a very lean body in that sense. Each of our training partner, for example, if I pick up Orion EduTech, which does very well, has almost 3,000 to 4,000 employees. In our case, and I'm just talking one training partner, we have 650. In our case, we run with about 200 people, and we manage this whole system because of, I think, the technology platform that we have created over time for managing this entire complexity. It's actually a lot of wisdom which has gone over time of almost 10 years, people preceding me and people who are there now. So that's how we function, essentially two sources of money. And then we do some work for the World Bank, and World Bank pays us. We work for World Bank in Jordan. We do some work for World Bank in Maldives. They pay us, obviously. We do a lot of work for private sector. For example, when somebody wants to set up a skilling center, they want to get accredited, affiliated. There are certain norms that they have to follow. And whether they are following that norms or not, we are the ones who actually do a verification of that entire process. And we get paid by the private sector for doing that. So any entity which wants to, let's say, get themselves as star rating, as we call it, getting into our smart portal, then they pay us for that. We do the inspection, and we'll tell you whether you are 3-star or 4-star or 5-star based on certain objective criteria. And that's again another income source that comes to us. We do a lot of CSR work. And we also, and this is for private sector as well as PSUs, they also pay, again, the 4%, the charge that we have, they also pay that to us. So these are various sources of income that we have, which unfortunately is very limited, which doesn't allow me to expand as much as I would have wanted. But I think we are still able to maintain a level of quality and attract quite talented people to work with us.
So that is very impressive. That amount of work that you're doing with the workforce that we have, that is really, really very impressive. So what I hear when it comes to funding, either you are earning that money by being part of various projects, or government is giving you some grant. What is the role of these private sectors who own 51% of your current shareholding? Are they not contributing financially in any way?
So I see the way I think the private sector money comes in is not through the chambers of commerce and all. They provide us insights into what is it which is happening in the private sector. So, for example, each of these chamber of commerce has ended up creating sector skill councils, which is the, and these sector skill councils are the ones which gives us an insight into what is it which is happening. Let's say in gems and jewelry sectors, we have a gems and jewelry sector skill council. Now, what is it that is in demand? You and I would not know because we are not connected with that. But they have very deep knowledge that this is how it is evolving. This is where automation is coming in. This is where AI is coming in. And therefore, we actually tweak our courses based on that. We create courses with the help of SSC and tweak courses with the help of SSC. Now, there is a cost to all this, which is being borne by them. We don't compute that cost. But I think if you look at it in terms of pure cash, maybe what I spoke of was cash, but there are a lot of energy which is actually being spent by people in terms of time. and in terms of know-how, which if you went to market to buy will be pretty expensive. But we don't have a method of actually calculating, but you understand, you run a business, so you know that these things cost money. And if you were to set up even a course, which is very deep and new, it's not going to come easy. I mean, there will be experts who we have to pay, and these experts cost money. So we get all that, we put all of them together, and then we give it to government saying that, okay, this is what is going to come latest. We have an expiry date to every course that we create. We call it qualification packs. We have created 2,400 of them over time with the help of SSCs. So this is again a cost, which I think the private sector know-how, which the private sector is bringing. So it's not just money. I think, this requires both money and know-how, and also the connect. The fact that if I look at, one of the recent thing which we did, as an example, we created something called ASEEM portal, which is a directory of all the skilled workers that we have. And from among them, there are a lot of people who want to go for jobs. Now, from among them who want to go for jobs, how do you get connected? We have a demand side of jobs, which is through Better Place, one of our partners. They are the ones who are collecting across the sectors the demand that is emerging within India and pushing it into the same portal. So there is a supply side which I'm giving, and there's a demand side which private sector is giving, and both of them get combined. And people in last 2 months have got about 300,000 plus offers, even in COVID times, with logistics in Karnataka being the highest. And I've got the names and details of every person who has got that offer letter. So this is possible because of that portal. Now, how did we create the portal? There's no money involved even of NSDC. We get the idea, but it's basically private sector, like in this case, Better Place, who came to our board, spoke to all our board members, understood the system, and put their own money into it, into creating that.
Which company you said who did this?
This is a group called Better Place. Better Place in, this is in Karnataka, it's Bangalore based actually. And I found very innovative and forward-looking. And we encourage such people, whenever they come, whoever is coming, with new ideas, new thoughts, that, okay, let's work together, whether it is, Better Place. And depends on what level of engagement they want. Some people just want to know a bit. Some people really want to get deep into it. And as we are market makers, we enable the market to emerge out of this. And this is what we do. And so therefore, I think the private sector contribution comes from different ways. Even if you look at the lending part, I only lend maybe 70%. There's 30% which actually comes from the private sector initially. Then people can say, okay, you can manage all these in books. I understand all that. But you see, you are running a system, you are creating revenue, and you're putting that back into the business. If you are surviving for 10 years, it is not that I give you one money maybe in 2009 and you still survive by that. It means you are redeploying back that money into the business. And it means that the business is generating something for you. So therefore, that's a private sector money again, right? So when we look at that, we have found that if government has invested about 1,000 crore through the lending instrument, the private sector has contributed between 1,500 crore to 3,000 crore. Depending upon which way I calculate it. If I'm very conservative, it's 1,500 crore. If I'm little relaxed about how we compute, then it's 3,000 crore, almost, that they have invested over 10 years' time. Again, not necessarily these chambers of commerce, but essentially the groups that work under them. So each of these industry would be connected in one way or other to one of the industry bodies, and that's how we work with the private sector.
So, Dr. Manish, is very important. Present certain sector. So one question that I have is, we are a democratic country, right? We always have difference in opinion. So we can't have one industry body representing the entire industry. There will be more than one body. So how do you, and these bodies are the ones who are also kind of owning the sector skill council in terms of defining the standard and so on. How do you handle when there are two bodies claiming to be representing the same industry? And I'm sure that must be happening, right?
Yeah, it does happen. It does happen. So, and I think we have over time developed methods of, working it out. So we might actually agree. And this is an agreement which occurs across the table where people sit and discuss that one of them could own it, but the other can also use it, and how they divide let's say the intellectual capital out of it is based on certain agreement between the two. So you are right. I mean, there can be differences between people, and there should be, because I think when you have a creative differences with people, that's what leads to growth. A society that doesn't have difference will never grow. So I think that difference is actually useful to us. Question is, are we able to create that collaborative platform? We have found that we have been able to, and I think the leadership in SSCs have also been very wise and mature. Each of these SSCs, even if they come from FICCI or ASSOCHAM or CII, you'll find that people who sit in them could be from some others. And therefore, it's fairly expansive in that sense. So, it may be led by, like, if you look at healthcare, is led by, Dr. Naresh Trehan. And then you'll find Max Hospital there. You'll find, Apollo, and you'll find actually quite a large number of people representing them. It's not a small coterie, and we are also aware of the fact that it needs to be expansive. We encourage that, and whenever, in fact, even at this point of time, we are in this process of expanding some of the sector skill council that we thought were too limited and perhaps is not representing this sector. So that discussion keeps happening. It actually, and ministry is quite conscious of that. Decisions on that or discussions on that happens at the level of minister also. And eventually we are the ones who go out in the field and then select the right individual who should represent, and we go back to SSC, tell them that you are having good people, but can you please add 2-3 more because they'll make you deeper and richer, and they respond. So this is how we ensure that everybody is participating.
No, that's really good to know, Dr. Manish. Next, coming back to the question I wanted to ask was that, again, this is related to NSDC perception. It is again perceived as a body that works towards or cares about the skill of blue collar worker, and that is rightly so. In our country, that's a large part of our population. Many of them are not well educated, so they don't know also that what all could happen to them if they're skilled well. But there is a feeling that a sector that gets a lot of export revenue, sector that is growing, is somewhat neglected. There is not enough being done for that sector. So how do you look at that perception?
See, I think if you look at India, we always try to divide that into 4 categories, in terms of, let's say, different income quintile. So the first income quintile, a quartile, 25%, 0 to 25 percentile, is actually earning 26,000 rupees or below. The next income quartile earns between 26,000 and 37,000 per month. Then the next income quartile, that is 50th percentile to 75th percentile, they earn between 37,000 and 58,000 per month. And anybody who earns above 58,000 and above are actually the top 25% of India. 57,000 rupees per month. So you're top 25%.
So per month, per person or per family?
I'm talking of labor and how much he earns, right? I mean, so I'm talking in terms of 42 crore people who are in the labor market. And I'm looking at these labor, so I'm not talking household terms. I'm looking at it as labor and how they're distributed across these income quartiles. Not everybody in India is in labor force. It's only about 42 crore, right, out of total. So I'm just restricting myself to that. Now, when we look at this particular division, anybody who earns above 88,000 is top 10% of India. That's the unique thing. And then you realize that everybody who sits and talks in this kind of thing is actually the top 10% of India. Right? So, and we obviously are more capable than the bottom 25% of India. We can look after our interest far much more. And so, if I were to pay too much attention to this part, I know I can make difference there. But perhaps for a country to move forward, you need to keep your attention focused at the bottom 25 in a continuous way. And that's also usually the government's intention when they create bodies like us, because they know that industry on its own was also operating before NSDC, right? I mean, it's not as though we are the ones who would have made huge difference in the skilling of industry. L&T had its own, let's say, training systems. So did Infosys, so did Wipro, and everybody else who has money. So I think we therefore naturally, and as you said, quite naturally, focus on the bottom half. But it doesn't mean that we are not aware of the top half. Yeah. So we might actually spend more of our time and energy at the bottom, but we do spend quite a bit of our thought along with SSCs, because that's where SSCs come into play, as they represent the sectors, and some of these sectors are actually servicing more the upper part. For example, ITS, if you take that, BFSI, banking and financial service and insurance. That's not the bottom. And there are, of course, things which will happen at bottom 50%, but it's usually the top to the 50%. So these SSCs and we work quite deeply. We have created courses that are which are futuristic, and we call it the future of jobs. Future Skills is a platform now being worked on by ITS Sector Skill Council together with NASSCOM, and they have courses, and that's recently been cleared, I think, with quite a bit of funding coming from MITI also, where they will actually be taking it out or rolling it out. And there are going to be things like artificial intelligence, there are going to be blockchain technologies. These are all, for the top 10% in a way. So I guess you're right in a way, but it also means I'm also trying to say that we are not completely unmindful of the top 10%. I think we are trying to be fair, that can be, devote a fair amount of time at the bottom too, and ensure that there is enough for the top also, that they are not completely neglected. So I hope I could make some give you some insights.
That's a very good point, and I think being part of the top 10%, I understand that there are people who have never got an opportunity. So we have a moral responsibility also towards them to give them, because many times people don't know what they don't know. Like sometimes some of these politicians during election, they offer them some freebies, and people are so happy. They don't know that's their own money which is coming to them in some form or other, maybe 1/100th of the money that belongs to them. So we understand that part. But I want to drive one important point was that when you think about this top 10% or 15% people, I think one thing that is mostly ignored is that if when you are talking to industry representative, they are actually representing the employees of that company. Like, for example, you spoke about NASSCOM. I refuse to accept NASSCOM as a representative of IT employees. So NASSCOM represents IT companies. For them, the interests of those companies, the stakeholder of those companies are more important rather than the employees who are working in the company. And what I was talking about, those employees, and they are the ones who are paying taxes, not that companies paying tax on their behalf. They're paying their tax. So what could be done to them so that they can also continuously upskill? Now, while this classification of certain amount of money looks very high when you compare to the bottom percentile people, but when you look at the cost of living in big cities, it's not that many people who are on 50,000-60,000 rupees in a city like Delhi, Mumbai, and Bombay, they really live a very good life. They are somehow managing with the cost that they have to incur. So one thing that I always wonder is that at one end, government is not giving them something, but at least we should not de-incentivize them. Like, for example, if you take a course, you have to pay 18% GST. Now 18% GST being paid by a person to buy a skilling course, on that money is a post-tax money. It's not a pre-tax money. Then the effective amount becomes actually maybe 13, 14, maybe 23, 24%, right? So one thought was that can this kind of policy intervention can be thought of so that people are encouraged to take up courses on the same line like how government encourage, let's say, insurance, right? If you take some kind of insurance, you can expense out. So why can't something like that be done?
Actually, it's already existing. So probably you're not aware of it. So anybody who becomes an NSDC partner, and we have two types of partner. One we give funding, as I said, but you could be a non-funded partner. We do our due diligence to check whether this particular company is actually genuine and all that kind of thing. And we make it a non-funded partner. And as long as the non-funded partner or funded partner is entering data of people whom they skill into our Skill India portal, because that's where the government wants information about, how many people are getting skilled. We do have GST exemption. I mean, our board has given GST exemption, which we sent to ministry, and I found that being respected. So these 18%.
I'm surprised because we are a non-funded partner. We have never used this facility. Whenever we check,
so take a letter from us, and you claim from your, because you see, we don't make income tax advice. Obviously, it's not our job. Income tax has its own, method. They do stuff. But when somebody will ask us, we do give them this response because it's a board decision. We share that with people. Ministry knows about it. Ministry of Finance knows about it. So, I mean, it's a collective decision eventually that, emerges out of all these. And I think, it's something which is existing. Let me tell you that. And you should try that out. But, we are also concerned about this. Honestly, when GST came in, earlier it was better because, better in the sense that it was very clear that service tax will not be there for any skilling done through NSCP. And that clarity was better. But this, with GST coming in, there are various kind of problems. Even if you made it zero, there were issues because there were input cost and output cost, and you found that some people actually preferred 5% GST than zero GST. Then we agreed on certain methods, and that's what the board approved. So I think you should take that, they're from writing from us, and check out if that helps you. we are more than happy to assist you there. We believe in exactly what you said. I mean, and I think the government also honestly believes in that. It's just that, well, I mean, there's a change in system, so there would be, different levels of the government where probably that understanding is not as clear as it was in the case of service tax. So maybe it requires some bit of, persuasion from your side. But secondly, just coming to the very, briefly on the part where you spoke about why don't we focus on employees and why on industry? When you look at skills, there are two ways to approach it. One is you approach from the productivity angle. And then second, you approach from human capability angle. There are two different angles completely. And people have, different views that which should we pursue. In India, we have usually pursued productivity. If you look at it, we want to enhance our productivity because we want to make use of our demographic window. That's the reason why we say that. Unfortunately, what's also happened is because of rapidly changing technologies, you'll find industry, which normally from 1920 onwards would give a certain share of whatever they earn big time to workers below them. Because of rapidly changing technologies from 1990s, after the coming of internet and digital platform, etc., they have been forced to reinvest quite a large amount of money into technology. And I'm sure you understand this better than others. It is changing so rapidly that you'll be out of business if you're not upgrading yourself. And we have not reached that stable plateau kind of phase in this whole digital revolution. So workers actually tend to get less compared to and this is global, it's nothing to do with India. And I think that's one of the reasons why you might feel, that the human capability part is being neglected. But it's a challenge of the industry because of the fact that we have entered a digital revolution. And perhaps until we reach that plateau, this will occur a bit. And human capability is important, but that's I think we have to think more. And guys like you actually do quite a bit out there.
No, so thank you, sir. So I think we are approaching time. I think we had very limited time. So I want to just focus last few minutes on there are many tech entrepreneurs or people who are interested in education listening to this conference. Can you share about some of the projects that you're working on wherein people can collaborate with NSDC? Is there a formal process wherein they can join NSDC and do something together?
Yes, so we have a whole team which works in EduTech, and as you know, you are also partners, so therefore you are aware of that part. What we have done, and I think we'll have to co-create many of the things. We are completely open to ideas. But essentially, what we have done so far, let me state that there are people who have approached us saying that they want to partner with us for their outreach. And since we have 9,000 centers, we have so many PMKKs, one PMKK Prime Minister's Kaushal Kendra in each district. So we get into partnership and we disseminate information about the particular EduTech that partners with us. So this is one aspect of it. We also have a EdTech platform. We call it eSkill India platform, where we provide links to your website and details about your website. We share in that platform. There are lots of free courses available there. There are certain partners like Sailor Academy in US who has given courses free of cost. There's IBM there with their courses. There is TCS Ion, which is there with their courses. We have Microsoft. We have LinkedIn. LinkedIn offering a free course, which we got into recently. Simply Learn, obviously, we know that you are also one of our partners and you are there. So I think what we try and do currently is encourage people to advertise themselves and let others know that what is it that you can offer. But second thing which we are planning to do, and I think this is something which is going to come in just next 1 month, we are planning to get into a hackathon, and we are trying to create certain problem statements, and we want EduTech to come up with ideas that they can solve. And based on the kind of solution that you provide, we'll even finance them and get private sector entities who would be willing to finance them. So this is something which is new, and if you have more ideas, as I said, this is a process of co-creation. EduTech is a completely new space. And as you said, we have the potential to be leader out there. So if you think you can leverage NSDC in a particular way to make EduTech better in India and reach out to the people that I spoke of, and right up to the last mile, then we are more than open to help you do that. So yeah, you're welcome with your ideas.
So thank you, sir. So all the tech entrepreneurs who are attending this session, I think there are a lot of opportunity to become part of NSDC, and maybe NSDC can be a vehicle that can help you reach the audience because they have really large audience, 9,000 plus centers across the India. We also heard that hackathon is a new theme that NSDC is working on. So go ahead and contact us, sir. share like how can they contact, like what is the best way to contact NSDC?
I think you can go to our website. You'll get links of various officials who are there, so you can write to any of them. But if you don't, then you can write to CEO email ID ceo@nsdcindia.org, and somebody in my office will definitely pick it up. Will reply to you and send it to appropriate person, and we can take it forward from there.
Yeah. Thank you, sir. Thank you for your time. It was really valuable, and I get to learn a lot about NSDC. I'm sure everybody too got much better informed about what NSDC is and how it operates and how we can collaborate with them. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Krishna. Pleasure talking to you.
Thank you, speakers, for taking your valuable time out today to join us. That was a very interesting conversation. I would also like to take a moment to thank our partners, Zendesk, Amazon Web Services, Dell Technologies, PayPal, Lead Squared, and Redseer. We will be right back after a quick 10-minute break. Please visit the expo hall and check out the booths on display.